Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to Dungeons&Discourse, a discussion podcast where we talk about all things D&D related. I am Carlo, and I'm joined today by
Walter.
Yes, and the discussion or the topic of today's episode is how we got started playing Dungeons and Dragons, be that maybe originally as a player or as a DM. In general, the idea is to kind of show how to get started in general, if you're still a little bit unconscious about it, or what's a good way to introduce new people to the game, so you can immediately have a group of people to play with. I wanted to start originally by asking you, Walter, how you got started with D&D.
Well, actually, I started off as a dungeon master because my group of friends, we decided we wanted to play D&D. A friend of mine heard of it, and he suggested it to the group, and there was no one actually with experience or knowledge about the rules. So I took the mantle of DM upon myself.
Very noble of you.
Yeah. Well, we started off with the starter editions, just online bots. Probably the point where most people start. I took a while reading the rules, getting familiar with them, and then I actually started running the game. Looking back on it now, it was really clunky, and combat especially took really long.
Yeah, I think that's everyone's experience in general, right?
Yeah.
The first D&D game that you run isn't going to be perfect, and it's most likely going to be very clunky. Yeah.
But I had the advantage that all of the people on my table were friends, knew each other already, so role-playing was actually quite naturally. I was surprised how well they got on so quickly, actually. Which made it more easier for me as DM also to try and introduce new things.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I think that's something that you tend to underestimate when you're going to start with D&D in general, is that it's a game that at its core it's really just roleplay. And that's essentially telling stories. And that's what humans have been doing for generations, right? So I think it's a thing that comes very natural to a lot of people, even if they don't realize it, which makes it very easy to kind of get started once you figure out the rules and someone to take up the mantle as Dungeon Master, of course, which isn't generally something that I'd say does require a bit more effort, especially if you're starting out.
Yeah, because you always need that arbiter who guides everyone through combat, especially knowing at least the basic of the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I was curious, how did you actually get started? Did you get started as a player or DM specifically?
No, my story is not as similar to yours, but I also started out as a dungeon master. But I took on the mantle myself. I think I was the first one to really get in touch with Dungeons and Dragons. I think the first time I saw it was on some YouTube videos by a YouTuber named Pro Jared. I don't know if you heard about him. There was a discussion.
Sadly not.
A couple of years back. It's probably a good thing. But that's when I first got in contact with the concept of D&D. And at that point it was still very foreign to me, but it seemed interesting. At least the stories he told about it seemed ridiculous. Like, it was a game which you could literally do anything, which I think, at least it's as close as you can get to it, as far as role-playing games or similar things go, right? And then a couple years later, I found this series run by College Humor, which is a YouTube channel. They started creating this D&D series called Dimension 20. And that's when I really saw what it was like playing Dungeons & Dragons for the first time. And then I understood what it actually was. And it looked really interesting and really fun. So I figured, hey, I can do this myself. I bought some dice. I found some friends to indoctrinate. And then I wrote up a really crappy one-shot or introduction to what would have been a campaign if I'd...
Your first creation as a dungeon master was something not pre-written, as entirely yourself?
I actually did some reading, and I found a lot of people online that weren't very in favor of pre-written campaigns because you can often force your players to railroad or just generally they're very linear. And what I really wanted to do was to create something myself because it seemed like a challenge and very interesting. And then also, yeah, I was just curious. I was thinking all of the rules of the game, and I figured, well, if I'm going this far right, I might as well go the extra mile and make up something myself. In hindsight, that probably was a bit of a disaster, but it was a fun disaster in the end.
My first campaign quickly got ended due to scheduling problems. But then I started a new campaign, entirely my own plot, my own world, and that was a mess compared to the first game.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I'm very curious.
Yeah, it's hard because you have a limited amount of knowledge about monsters, and so creating a plot is kind of difficult, especially if you're getting to know the stuff in the races, how they interact with each other, like making specific cities where like trading is a big thing, and you would have a dwarven forge right there and an elven woodworker apart from it. And that whole interaction between the races, because humans live for like say 80 years, but elves and dwarves still live nearly closely to 1,000 years.
Yeah.
The difference between that was really hard getting into scope.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
Basically, I just got that whole aspect out in my thing.
That's
just
exactly
said,
what I would do as well.
Yeah, just said, alright, this country is mainly run by humans, and there is some elves over there, but they generally are isolated and stuff. Yeah.
I think I did something very similar, which is try to reduce the scope of things.
Yeah.
I think when I first started, I literally just thought about, okay, we'll maybe have a city here, and then there's a forest I'll lead my players to later, and then, you know, maybe I'll have some plot hooks. If this is really going to be interesting, then it's good to have those prepared. But if you're going to immediately think out an entire city for your first session, right, mechanically, merchant routes, all of the different races, that's a lot, right?
That's a big, beginner mistake.
It doesn't have to be a mistake, because it can be really interesting. But I think at that point, it's something your players probably won't engage with as much.
Yeah. Especially if they're also,
newer.
Newer and learning the ropes.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's actually, because your group ended because of scheduling conflict. Mine ended on a very different note, I think. Because one of the 4 players that I had found turned out to not really like D&D. So we immediately had like sessions where 3 people were, kind of into it. They were still a bit iffy on the rules, and they didn't really get how the role playing went down because it created some odd characters. But that other player just started doing annoying shit. When he'd get bored, he'd start attacking the party because he wanted some conflict. And that's very difficult if it's your first game, because you can't have a proper D&D game if you have that much hostility like going in the game, especially within the party. At least not if you're not very experienced, I'd say. So at that point, it became a very difficult thing, where we had 3 people that wanted to keep playing, and 1 person that just really wasn't into it. So eventually we had to cut them off, and then the entire thing just kind of fizzled out, and they had to start again with a new group. Although most of the people from that original group are still playing now, what they had written at that point just went straight into the garbage bin, because we weren't going to touch that campaign again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in general, your first D&D campaign can be really good, but I think from each other's experiences, it's most likely going to be neat clunky and probably not going to last all too long.
So, in generally, for new players, a little conclusion, or actually new DMs, I meant to say, just keep the scope small and stick to what you know and what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And make sure your players are into it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's like a huge part of being a DM, which makes it sound really scary immediately. But it's at the heart, right? You're really trying to find fun for your players.
Yeah, you have to tailor their experience.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you can't have fun yourself as a DM, but you have to do things competently or in a smart way so everyone can keep enjoying the game. So there's a lot of pitfalls and things you can stumble over. right? Like railroading and power tripping DMs is like something that you want to avoid. You need to actively make fun for the other players, which can be a little demanding, I'd say.
In my experience, new players, as a DM, new players are often very shy to the roleplay aspect. They
Definitely
really need to get into it in this different character. And how do you deal with that? Because I actually haven't found a way that works for everyone. Sometimes you got just put people on the spot, but sometimes with other people they just freeze and do nothing anymore for the whole session.
I think it's very difficult, and it's something I struggle with a lot as well, especially now with online play. It gets even more difficult, right?
Yes.
I think one of the biggest advantages that you can have is if people know each other prior to the actual D&D campaign.
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah, because at that point you're already kind of comfortable with each other. Yeah. And role-playing can be a very intimidating thing, right? Because in a way it's kind of exposing yourself, kind of, right? You're leaving yourself a little bit more exposed. And I can see how it's a scary thing. So I think that helps a lot if you're in a more comfortable environment for people that you know.
Yeah.
And then also, one thing that I also think helps a bit is if you try to not put on too much pressure, right? If someone doesn't want to roleplay, they don't have to, and they can kind of try to do that on their own terms, and maybe they'll try it at some point and think that they're really into it.
Yeah.
But low pressure is also a good rule, I think, in general.
Definitely, low pressure.
Yeah. But you don't have any tips or tricks when it comes to learning to roleplay or getting people into it?
Well, my first tip would be from a player's perspective, just really try out and get to know your character, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Good example is I have used to have Dragonborn, a spellcaster that was afraid of fire, but he was a red Dragonborn and he was resistant to fire.
Yes.
But it was and he would use fire spells as well, but he would be terrified from fire itself.
Yeah.
Even though he was well, like I said, resistant to it. He was born with it, and he uses it. Every time he used a spell like Firebolt, he would be afraid from the fire himself and the power that he wields.
Mm-hmm. And that would then in turn maybe create a small roleplay moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay, cool. Yeah. That's very interesting to kind of create characters that actively stimulate role playing or kind of can engage with it at moments. I think that's some good advice, actually. Yeah. I think in generally there's a lot of things you can do with character creation that can help stop problems that might appear later down the line.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm personally a huge fan of session zeros, where you just discuss what the game is going to be like. Everybody knows what the expectation is going to be, and you can kind of work out. Also work people's characters into the story, and give them those little quirks that stimulate roleplay.
Yeah.
Really
Session
cool.
0 is for me actually just required, because I like to very tailor my experience as a DM for my players.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to incorporate things from their backstory, important characters that the player knows, like a brother or something, throw them into the mix of the whole story, and sometimes put them in, let's not say dangerous, but difficult situations for them.
Yeah.
As well morally as just physically dangerous. To make it more engaging, but also more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Just that's kind of like the power of the session 0, right? Is to really immediately get the ball rolling. Because then when play starts, you don't have to figure these little things out. You can just get to it.
And also the dynamic between players, because it doesn't have to be a party of strangers that starts an adventure.
Yeah, that's true as well.
And session 0, you can work out. Fun thing. My first campaign,
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 Dragonborns that were from the same tribe. But they were like this tribe got attacked by humans because that's what they do. They take over shit and they build castles.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were most likely British, weren't they?
Not especially, but
Okay.
I mean.
French,
But
maybe.
this tribe got destroyed and people got enslaved and stuff, and that was nice plot hook. But also, they knew each other beforehand, and when the party finally joined, they were like, "Wait, weren't you him?"
Oh, I see.
And
That's cool.
that created a moment of roleplay immediately, even though they were both new players.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Kicked off something really fast, really good.
Yeah. Kind of attaching players to each other through weird bonds. I think that's something I'm trying to play with a lot nowadays. Is to kind of see how much you can intertwine player characters with each other, or even make them more mistrusting of each other, which is something that I first discovered when I read through the secret features in the Wrong with the Frost Maiden campaign setting.
Yeah.
You have a couple like pages where you have character secrets, which is a specific feat and sometimes, and then a little bit of a backstory attached to it. That is just supposed to be a character trait or a feature that kind of fleshes out a character. But usually they are something dark or something that would cause other players to be very mistrusting of them.
Yeah.
And that kind of creates also some tension in the party, which you can use really well.
Like,
because
nice example, one of the party is a changeling.
Yeah, for instance. Yeah. That's would, actually one of them.
Yeah, that would turn them upside down, like, immediately. Distrust goes up for everybody.
Exactly. And it gives that player a reward for kind of creating the tension, because they get to also use changing features. But then also you get this like strange party dynamic where if they're hiding a secret, then what other secrets might the other players be hiding, right?
It might also like bring them closer eventually. Of course, it's a ticking time bomb, and it will go off. But the damage, it might actually work to bring your party closer.
Yeah, exactly.
Or most likely just throw them apart and even make them more distrustful. And eventually you have a splitting party on your hands.
No, exactly. But that's where you like start to get the bonds in there, right? So maybe they are both part of the same tribe. And now, 4 sessions later, they discover that one of them harbors a very dark secret. At that point, it almost becomes a more morally difficult dilemma, right? Okay, I've already fostered a bond with this person. They clearly care about me. How does my relation to this player character change now that I know that they are, for instance, a werewolf or something like that?
Yeah.
I think it creates some very interesting dynamics that can also lead to a lot of roleplay. So yeah, I think the general advice is if you are looking for more roleplay moments, there's a lot you can do with character creation in sessions.
As seemingly this is our first session, just don't go too dramatic, because
that's true. Yeah.
If you got like a werewolf in the party who actively hunts people at night while the others don't know it, that's just bound for party split up or a player character death. Yeah,
you do have to be smart about it.
Yeah,
but that's where like balancing things comes in, right? Werewolf, it's only a full moon, so it's like every month. In play, you're maybe gonna encounter that once or twice. But when it does happen, immediately all kinds of wacky derailing is gonna take place. But that's a good point, especially if you're starting anew. Maybe this is already some feedback that isn't
because
specifically tailored to new players. Because
you have to be careful with it. It's very fun if you can pull it off well, but that's the thing. If you can pull it off well,
Yeah, you're right. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a
Yeah.
little bit. Well, maybe that's also a good point to end this discussion and maybe start a new one and move on to one of our segments.
Yeah.
I think the idea is very clear, or at least clearer than it might have been before for new DMs or players. Yeah, let's introduce a new segment. Our first
I'm very
segment,
curious.
which is Monster of the Week. This is the idea that we've been working with. This is going to be a weekly segment, Monster of the Week, in which we just take a specific monster or a set of monsters from the monster manual or a different supplement or rulebook. And we kind of try to look at all of the features it has, how you would incorporate it into a campaign. And then hopefully, for you guys listening, it might give you some inspiration or even some interesting encounters to run.
Yeah.
So, a set of creatures that I've prepared today are Blights. I'm not sure if you've ever run those or know what they are.
They're plants, right?
Yes. That's exactly why they chose them. Why I chose them. Because I think plants are very underrepresented as far as creatures go. So I figured for the first episode, we'll discuss a plant type creature.
I actually know very little of them. I know, well, I encountered them in Jungle once as a player, but I never really used them as DM.
Yeah, I've used them once. Doing some more research today, I covered a lot of interesting things about them that I didn't consider before. If you want, I can just give you a quick rundown, and then we can talk about it.
I'm gonna take a look at their intelligence. Are they actually intelligent creatures?
Oh, I actually didn't look that up specifically. Usually I look past intelligence when writing monsters, just because I think anyone can be interesting, regardless of intelligence.
It looks like they all have bad intelligence. So I see -3, basically in almost every stat block.
Okay,
so just give me impression like they're not really smart monsters. They might stick together. But...
The way it works is that they are under control of this corrupted tree. It's called a Golfius tree. Oh. So whilst they aren't intelligent themselves, they kind of serve its purpose in a sort of corrupted way. There's like a whole backstory to the origin of this tree. Essentially, the way it went down is that there's this very strong vampire.
Okay.
Built a huge tower, and then an adventurer showed up and decided that maybe it wasn't a good idea to have a vampire around. So he killed him with a stake. And then the stake, infused with the vampire's blood, started developing into a sapling.
Oh no.
Then an evil druid came by, found the sapling, decided, well, it might be evil and corrupted, but I'm a druid, so I'm going to plant it. And that spawned this Golfius tree. The vampire's name was Golfius, that's why they're named that. And this tree started creating seeds, and the blights spawned from these seeds. So the idea behind these blights is that they are now sort of serving or working with this tree to accomplish the goals that the evildoer that the tree originated from would have wanted to accomplish.
Really?
Yeah. So a group of blights might target some foes that evildoer had like ages past. Or maybe they'll try to finish the evil plans that the actual vampire or lich could never accomplish.
Is this the only way like blights are created? Through this tree?
Yeah, I believe that's what the lore says. I mean, there's so much homebrew in D&D, right? You can do whatever you want with it. Because there's not a lot of plant creatures. But that's the main idea behind it. That there's a tree and blights are controlled by it. And what they do is they start infesting forests. So they start uprooting unhealthy plants. They start spreading weeds and stuff. And eventually they'll start over entire towns. Start taking over entire towns. So they become this very like quickly spreading corruption thing almost. It all starts with this evil tree. Which I think can already start out a lot of shenanigans. If you're trying to write plot hooks, right? One of the ideas that I thought about was, say your players take down the BBEG, right? Mm-hmm. The ultimate evil doer in your campaign. Oh, maybe 5 years later, there's all of a sudden just this tree there, and maybe the plans are revived by this group of plants that is now organizing and trying to accomplish them again.
A group of plants that is finishing a mastermind. BBEG's plan. It's just mind-blowing.
Oh, exactly. So already, although they seem very simple, like just from the surface, they're just some evil plants. And they're very spooky. Oh no. But actually, they can like work together and start accomplishing grand evil designs, which I think is really cool. But yeah, I generally also try to think about how to like build them into encounters, and I ran an encounter with them as well. But just what are your current thoughts? I'm kind of curious.
My current thoughts are like just blights themselves, like the monsters.
Mhm.
Did they give me a similar vibe as zombies? These very low intelligence minions that you send out to go do something
Mhm.
that are controlled mostly by some higher up power,
Yeah, that's
like
pretty
a
fair.
necromancer.
Yeah.
But they actively also destroy and corrupt nature
Yeah.
to
They kind of feed off that corruption.
they
So they
make-
keep spreading it.
make a colony bigger. Do they have
It's
hive
not.
minds? Are they?
It's not too specific on that.
Mhm.
I think that's on purpose, right? So you can kind of give your
Yeah,
own
yeah.
spin on it. That's what they do a lot in these monster manuals,
Mhm.
is to keep a lot of things open for interpretation. Because that's where you can kind of create your own stories.
The thing I do see, they speak common.
No, that's just one of them.
Oh,
There's actually,
the rest. Yeah, now I see. Understands common but can't speak the rest.
yeah, the idea is that there's like one of the three blights that are in the monster manual, is that they can speak, but usually it's just these weird murmurs or combinations of words or sentences that the original person that created the tree would have said.
Oh.
So they speak in these really weird, creepy, distorted voices. But yeah, generally, they are better suited as minions. Of course, if you look at their CR, they're like 1/8, 1/4, and a half. But then you can also see them as more of a horde type enemy. Because it's a tree that keeps spawning them, so there's bound to be a lot. And I think that's also how you're supposed to run them a bit. I don't know if it's why you already start talking about the stat blocks or not, but
No, sure, go.
I feel like the three blights that we have here all have very unique rules. At the lowest tier, you have a 1/8 Twig Blight.
Yeah.
These guys have 4 HP. They're very weak. But they have a very special property, which is false appearance. That means that they can just stand somewhere, pretend to be a tree, then your players virtually have no way of figuring out that they're a blight. And that allows them to set up ambushes. So say your players enter a forest, all of a sudden the trees start moving around, they're trapped by these Twig Blights. And whilst they only do 1d4 damage and can't do much, they can assist the other blights by imposing disadvantage on players, or giving advantage to attacking blights. So they're more of like a utility type creature. At least that's how I can incorporate them, looking at their stats.
One time I done an encounter
Mhm.
with like a lot of undead against a group of level 4 or 5 characters. So I had a lot of zombies just dogpiling on them,
Yeah.
grappling, and just pinning them, throwing them to the ground, and just piling on top. And there was one like ghoul or will-o-wisp that was actually just doing the damage.
Mm-hmm.
And they had... I so underestimated their capabilities that I just had to fudge some rolls as not to get a party wipe. But that was actually... I underestimated power. Lower level stat blocks actually can contribute.
Yeah, I think that's something that you don't appreciate when you start out right away. That monsters don't just attack, right? They can also take very unique turns in trying to disrupt players in different ways. Which is exactly what I think these creatures are very well suited for. So if you're generally trying to come up with a more multidimensional or more interesting encounter, you can take a combination of these blights and do some more interesting things that players wouldn't expect, right? For instance, imposing disadvantage or giving advantage to attackers is something that I personally don't incorporate enough, or a lot. And these guys are exactly allow you to do just that. Yeah. But that's only the first. There's 2 more blights here. Oh, yeah.
That's also like getting into already combat with experienced players, most likely.
That's fair. Yeah. That's true.
So for normal players, it's probably just wise to throw a just a couple of monsters and around the CR that they can handle.
Yeah, that's fair.
Just to keep it simple.
I don't think, once again, a bit of an oversight on my part. I didn't pick the most new player friendly stat block.
But I like that we're going into this.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, because this is an episode that's also like talking about new players as well, that they don't get in over their head. But I really like this monster.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
Yeah, this whole idea that this tree is just spawning corruption and growing, and it's created from, like, originally a vampire, but it could be from any evil person.
That's what it states. It just has to be like a powerful being that can like corrupt things. So it could virtually be anything. I mean, a zombie like CR, what is it, 1/4 probably wouldn't create one of these trees.
But you can throw a nice spin to it if it's like a sapling that's grown out of a demon or something. Then you can give the Blights resistance to fire or something.
Exactly. I think
you can tailor them.
That's what it's very well suited for. You can tailor it a lot. You can really alter it in many interesting ways because of that lore that's kind of in the background.
I really did not know. They're such interesting characters.
Yeah, I know. It's strange because they're like all the way at the front of the monster manual. But you just go past them, you just think, oh, they're just some plant people. Cool, man. Where are the beholders at?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But no, they actually have a lot of cool mechanics behind them, I think.
Yeah.
And that's just a twig blight just discussed, right? But there's two other ones. There's a needle blight, which isn't all that unique, but it has a range attack. So they can just harass players from a distance and be a nuisance. Kind of put fighter characters in this dilemma. Are we gonna go out to the backlines of the enemies, try to take out these range attackers, exposing our mages or rangers that are still in our backlines?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we gonna accept this poke and harass, knowing that they will probably whittle us down at some point?
Yeah, because if you're fighting in forest and your front line goes away from your mage, suddenly you have these 4 trees that start moving around your mage,
exactly.
Which also just appear to be blight.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think they're such cool creatures.
Yeah.
They're very good at setting out ambushes and kind of having your players interact with them in weird ways that they wouldn't expect at first.
Yeah.
Because, once those trees actually do start moving around your wizards, that's a situation they probably haven't found themselves in a lot of times. So they gotta be thinking on their feet and trying to solve these new issues that you're kind of creating for them.
The spells Shield and Misty Steps come in, but we'll discuss that at a different time.
Yeah, fair.
But if you don't expect it, these things can, like, screw over a lot of parties.
Yeah, definitely. And even if you do have mobile or more defensive spellcasters, that's kind of where the third blight comes in, Divine Blight, which is slower. It only has 20 feet movement. But it has an attack that can grapple people. So you can stop your fighters from moving at all, protecting the backline. And it has a basically stronger version of the Entangle spell as an innate ability. Or I guess it's like one of those ones that refreshes if you roll a 5 or a 6 on the dice. And that means that you can root people and kind of have them be forced to stay in this blight mosh pit that you're actively trying to create around them. So it's very interesting how each blight is like their own rule, and together they set up this really interesting encounter. Yeah. There's actually one more blight as well. That's in the Curse of Strahd. That's a tree blight. But it's a CR7 creature, and it's way too strong if you compare it to these ones.
Is that the actual tree?
No. That's not the actual tree. There's no actual stat block for the Golfias tree that spawns the blight. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's also up to DM interpretation. Yeah. But yeah, I also didn't look at the tree blight too much, because I figured we'll just keep it to the monster manual for now. And I'm also kind of interested in building Curse of Strahd at some point, so I don't want to spoil too much already.
Alright.
Although that's probably like years in the future, knowing me and how disorganized I run my campaigns.
I did hear good things about Curse of Strahd.
I've heard a lot of good things.
Yeah.
And I think, in general, I like to stick with more gothic, kind of deep, depressing, somber atmospheres. And I think that's definitely one of the more...
That's going back at what you said. You like to give your players this mistrustful at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's even bad advice that I just really like about D&D. Just creating moral quandaries.
This is a good example. Just like make something you enjoy making.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
It's like the dark horror maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would call it horror, but maybe it comes close at times. I don't know. Probably you'd know that better as a player, what it actually feels like playing.
Maybe it's more desperate.
Yeah.
Desperate situations.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Which I, as your player in a couple of situations, they can be really memorable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's also like the general idea, is that if you create something that you actively enjoy, that you think is really cool, there's gonna be people that enjoy that and appreciate it as well.
Yeah.
So when I think, oh, this is a really cool desperate situation, if in this case, that's you that really enjoys it, but you're probably gonna find someone that's really into it. So that's a good point you made earlier. Just stick to what you like as a DM. Yeah. Yeah, actually, I'm really curious about what your like DM style is, because I've never actually played in one of your sessions or campaigns.
Preferably, I don't have a specific style. I just like making interesting NPCs with like building relationships between not relationships.
No, but I mean roleplay wise.
Roleplay wise, between the party and NPCs, and what if their favorite merchant is like on the verge of bankruptcy, or I don't know, their quest giver. How far would they go?
That's interesting. So you're putting a lot of social things in your campaign. Yeah. At least that's what I'm getting from what you just described.
And I like to create to have NPCs bond with characters.
Yeah, that's cool. That's in general also where a lot of powerful moments come from. Yeah, that's cool. I really want to play one of your campaigns. Goddamn.
You will.
But maybe we should stick to the topic at hand, Blights.
Yeah.
Or not, if we can have a more interesting conversation, of course. I actually did go back to that session that I ran that had Blights. I can kind of describe the encounter and setup, if that interests you. Or if you have any more thoughts you'd like to share, that's of course also welcome. In general, I think this is still figuring out what this segment is, right? Monster of the Week. So I don't know what's the most useful thing we can now do with this information about Blights.
So like a general description, where do they come from, what situation, where can you use them?
Yeah, I think that's what we did, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's any more bases we should have covered.
Not really, no. I think we covered Blights pretty much, except for the CR7 the Blight, but that's another story.
I also did see some more. I saw like, oh no, those weren't Blights actually. I did some more research even, looking into some more plant creatures. Because what I did when I actually ran them in my campaign is I didn't want to add that CR7 tree Blight, because that is just insane for a level 3 party. Yeah. But I decided to put in Awakened Trees instead. And just say, oh, these can be Blights as well. And you don't even have to change all that much about the stat block. You can really just give them the false appearance trait, and then they're already plants.
I mean, if the Blights is big enough, the corruption, you might even throw in a treant that has been corrupted.
That's CR9, so that's even worse than tree Blight.
Yeah, fair.
But yeah.
Maybe it's because it's corrupted, it's broken down, and it loses half its HP and strength or something.
That's essentially what I want to do with the Awakened Tree stat block, because it's a CR2 stat block. So essentially it is already a nerfed treant, or treant with less of a threat. And I did something very mean in that campaign actually, because I had them encounter a treant early on. So the second I started putting those walking trees in there, they were like already having flashbacks and going like, oh, we gotta get the hell out of here. But the Awakened Tree is just a CR2 creature. I'd say it's relatively strong as far as CR2 creatures go, because it's huge and it does a lot of damage with a slam attack.
Does it move?
Yeah, it moves. It's a awaken tree, so whenever I guess it's like an awaken spell you can cast. You have like plants that like are alive, kind. I didn't do that much research. Let's be honest here.
But do you know by heart what the movement speed of this awakened tree is?
I believe it's 30. It might be
It's 30.
Yeah, it's 30. Yeah.
So it actually has the potential to, actually doesn't really have the big potential of getting guided, because you have a lot of big monsters that have like a movement speed or 20 or lower even.
Yeah.
That you can perhaps just outrun, basically.
Yeah, I think. Well, still, if a player's gonna dash, right, that tree's still gonna or that awakened tree is still gonna have a hard time catching up, because it's just matching 30 movement speed with 30 movement speed. Then it just takes one mobile feat or similar speed bonus to already outrun it.
Yeah.
But I think in general, they can still be very disruptive, because if you put an awakened tree behind your players, they still are gonna have to walk around it. Actually, no, they can just walk past it because it's huge. But still, they're gonna have to like deal with its opportunity attacks and stuff like that. So I think they can still be very disruptive. And also, because it's huge, it can carry other blights, so you can kind of give it different attacks in that way. So say one of these fine blights climbs on top of that awakened tree, all of a sudden that awakened tree has an ally that can entangle your enemies or your players, not enemies.
And you have a couple of what were they? Twig blights.
Yeah, they can like
ones that up in its branches just shooting.
those are the needle blights. Yeah.
Needle blights. Excuse me.
Yeah, and then the twig blights can just jump on players and just harass them and annoy them. So
Oh god.
you can almost create like this huge tree-based battle fort with all kind of weird blights on it.
I think you just did.
I actually did do that. Yeah, I had like well, the way the encounter was set up is that they had to get some supplies from a cart that was overrun by these blights. They didn't know this in advance, so essentially they walked into this ambush. They had to get that stuff out of the cart and get the hell out of Dodge, because there were going to be like 4 awakened trees, which is combined to CR8, which is way too much.
Yeah.
And then I added some more needle blights and stuff. So it was designed to be an encounter that they couldn't overcome with brute force. They had to just get out of there and make choices. Which supplies are we going to save from this cart, and which are we going to leave behind so we can outrun the trees. Awakened trees.
Yeah.
But yeah, eventually there were like awakened trees that were like carrying these twig blights that started like jumping off and stuff. So there's just a lot of cool things you can do with these creatures.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to fight that.
Especially if you're a player and you think all those awakened trees are actually CR9 trees. Because I put them in the campaign earlier. That was a very evil thing to do.
Yeah.
But it was a really cool encounter. And no players died. So they managed it in the end.
Alright, no players died.
No.
That's kind of winning in D&D.
Oh, I don't know. Sometimes if they do something stupid, they deserve to die, right? That's also a part of D&D. Actions should have consequences. But once again, that's probably a different episode topic.
Yeah.
Killing your players is also not something we should tell new DMs. Yeah. Well, I think that covers this segment then.
Yeah.
Unless you had something to add. I don't know how we are time-wise. We might want to jump into a next segment. Oh, never mind. We've been rambling for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should probably start wrapping up.
We really liked Blights.
Yeah, Blights are great. I think, hey, if you're a new player, the CR is low. You don't have to do all the complicated stuff we just discussed. But if you do want some cool creatures, go with Blights.
Yeah.
I mean, we basically spelled out an encounter for you, so do with that what you will. Any final thoughts before we close off the episode?
For new DMs, stick to what you like. Prepare and just get to know the rules. At least the basics, but the more you know, the better. So you can, inform your players, and but don't take this as like final advice, because you're also the DM. You can change the rules if you want to.
Yeah, definitely.
But whatever you do, do discuss it with your players. if you do change of rules.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most powerful statement.
Session 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important.
No, I think what you said earlier, actually, session 0, obviously, that one's king. Do one of those.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of just what you said, just do what you like, and it'll work. I think that's the great ending note, right? If you're thinking about starting with Dungeons and Dragons, getting some new players into the game, just stick with what you like. And if it appeals to them, they're going to come back and play more games with you. It's as simple as that.
And specifically for players, any advice?
Ooh.
New players?
If you're a new player, try not to be the DM, because then you have a lot of work. No, I think in general, if you're a new player, respect what the DM is doing, right? They obviously took a lot of time to think of something cool. They have something they're very passionate about and want to share with you, which is Dungeons and Dragons. So, yeah, just try to engage with it, but also be honest. If you don't like it, don't try to force yourself to do anything, or, try to DM to change things that he probably, we're going to keep the same, because the majority of people do actually like that. And generally, just try to have a good grasp on what you like, what you don't like as a player, because you don't want to stick around in the campaign that you don't actively like, and then unconsciously be making it worse.
No D&D is better than bad D&D.
Yeah, exactly that. So I think that's good player advice. Appreciate what your DM is doing, and just be honest. If you're not into things, then don't do them, right? I think that's it.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for hosting. I've enjoyed this tremendously.
Yeah, it's been a blast. I hope the listeners enjoyed it. They can let us know where can they let us know? There's probably some comment section on whatever platform we're gonna upload this. So, any feedback you want to correct us? Don't. But if you actually do have to, go ahead. Feel free. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good one.